Welcome to the 567 webinar. You're in the right spot. We are just about ready to get started, and I want to make a few announcements prior to this educational webinar on estate planning. My name is Jill, and I'm David Robertson's executive assistant. One of my main responsibilities is to help David in managing his very busy schedule. Many of you I met virtually via the phone when confirming your spot, but I'm not the one you came to hear. So before David begins, I'd like to make sure you grab a notepad and a pen so that you can capture any highlights or just jot down some questions that you may wish to expand upon. Be sure to click on the handout. Print it out if you like, if you haven't already. If you cannot stay on for the entire webinar, you can click on the link to set up your private consult at any time during the webinar. David will answer some questions at the end, but the best way to get them answered is to book your no-cost consultation. If you wish to sign up for his periodic videos, you can even call me at 248-344-0799. David has years of knowledge and experience behind him, and he's taught these educational classes for over 30 years. So it's only natural that he continue to help people make good decisions virtually with these webinars. Now, with those details out of the way, you took time out of your busy schedule to be here to receive some valuable information. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you David.
Hello, welcome to Estate Planning 567. I'm going to get started with a question. Question is this: what wisdom would you impart to your family or to the world if you knew it was going to be your last opportunity? Think about that for a moment. Before you on the screen, you can see two individuals. One you may recognize, the other one probably not. We're going to start with the individual that you probably don't recognize. He's in black and white, and his name is Randy Posh. We're going to get to know Randy a little bit. Randy was a computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon Institute. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at age 45. And at Carnegie Mellon, they had a tradition. The tradition was this, is that whenever there was they were going to retire somebody, or somebody was going to move on, that they were going to give them the opportunity to do their last lecture. Well, Randy, when he was diagnosed and he was offered the opportunity to give his last lecture, he knew that it was going to be his last lecture. Randy died at age 47 after his fight with pancreatic cancer. But Randy, as I said, during that time, those 2 years that he had, he wrote, he did the last lecture, and that became a viral sensation on YouTube. He appeared on Good Morning America. He appeared on Oprah, was featured in Time magazine, did many personal appearances. And people said, Randy, why, oh, why are you taking the time to do all of this stuff instead of spending time home with your family, with the time that you have left? Randy's response was this. He said, I know that the day that I die, for my family, it's going to be as if they were pushed off of a cliff. He said, I want to create a safety net to catch them and cushion the fall. If ever it was said that someone had a good death, I think that it was Randy. His book, The Last Lecture, that was a New York Times bestseller. Just a great story. And I'm also going to give you a homework assignment. And the homework assignment is this. If you were to pull up a piece of paper, a pencil, jot this down. Last lecture, Oprah. Because at the conclusion of this webinar, I'm going to ask that you go out and plug that into your browser and take a moment to meet Randy. It's a 10-minute video. I promise you that it is worthwhile. but you'll get to see, because we're going to refer back to Randy and what he did with his life. Randy had some quotes in his book. The key question to keep asking yourself is, are you spending your time on the right things? Because time is all that you have. Be prepared. Luck is truly where preparation meets opportunity. And to be cliche, this is Randy talking, death is a part of life. It's going to happen to all of us. I have the blessing of having a little bit of advance notice, and I'm able to optimize my use of time down the stretch. Once again, if anybody had a good death, I think that it was Randy. Now, contrast that with this individual, James Gandolfino, better known as Tony Soprano in the HBO hit series of the same name, The Sopranos. Tony, unlike Randy, he died unexpectedly while on vacation, actually after finishing up the last season of The Sopranos. He died while he was on vacation. He left less than 20% of his estate, of his assets, to his wife. About 40% of his estate went to taxes. Not what one would have planned, and I'm sure what he would have planned. Problem is that he didn't plan. Unlike Randy, who took the time to script out the time and go through and plan that out, Gandolfino didn't. And his life, unfortunately, ended much like the last season that he appeared in. If you're a fan of the series, the last season, Tony Soprano is on the run. The mob is after him. He thinks he's going to get killed, so he moves his family from house to house. And in the last scene of the last show that he appeared in, he's sitting at dinner with his family, and he keeps watching the door, because he doesn't know who's going to walk through. Is it going to be his daughter who he's waiting for, or is it going to be the hitman to take him out? Well, Tony's life ended in real life just like it did in the series. Fade to black, you're left guessing what the next chapter will be. Well, unfortunately, that was the end for both Gandolfino and The Sopranos. Welcome. My name is David Robertson. I'm a financial advisor here in Novi, Michigan. We own a registered financial advisory firm, and I have spent a good deal of my 32 years educating people on helping them to make good choices. You see, it never made sense to me all of my life for people to work hard, bust their tail, try to save money, invest well, and then at the end have things like happened to Gandolfino. Because of simply not planning, that you end up giving up so much of your estate to taxes, to the government, to attorneys. Here at my practice, we help people make good choices with their money. I'm going to pop up a little pop-up here on the screen for you. And at the conclusion of this webinar, you have the opportunity, if you can't make it for the whole 35 minutes that I have left, if you can't make it for the whole time, but you'd just like to chat, if you'd like to discuss, tell me what your situation is, and maybe we can help. Maybe we can point you in the right direction. If you'd like to schedule some time on my calendar, just hit that button. At the conclusion of this webinar, that my assistant Jill will be reaching out to each and every one of you to just try and get your feedback on this, some thoughts on estate planning and the generations. So with that said, let's get started here. What is the problem? The problem is Gallup tells us that 55% of adults don't have a will. They don't have any kind of estate plan. What is a will? What is a trust? What is a power of attorney? If you don't, those are all of those things. They're just pieces of paper. They're notes. They're instructions. They're notes that you're going to leave. If you all of those things together, your wills, trust, powers of attorney, which we're going to talk about this evening, all that together, we refer to that as your estate plan. Now, if you don't have an estate plan, if you haven't done one, well, the state has one for you, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But an estate plan, I said these are all just instructions. A better way to think about this is when you were maybe younger and you had small children and you were going to go away for the weekend or go away for the night, and you left the kids with the babysitter or grandma and grandpa. You probably left them notes. This is what to do if Johnny gets sick. Here's where the medication is. Here's where you need to take Sally for practice for soccer. Hey, if this happens, you do that. They're just notes that you left behind. They're instructions to the people that you love to take care of the other people that you love. Well, what is an estate plan? An estate plan is simply a note, some notes, instructions that you're going to leave behind, but only this time you're not coming back. Well, if you don't have a will or a trust, as I said, the state of Michigan has one for you. If you don't leave behind any official direction or guide for your family, the state will step in. They will step in and they will make those decisions for you. The problem is they're probably not the same decisions that you would make had you thought things through. And in the absence of any instructions that you leave, family members are left to step in and interpret your will or your wishes. And as you know, if you have several different people, you're going to have several opinions, and there's a great chance for disagreement about what you had wanted. Your estate goes to probate. Probate court is a process, a legal process, whereby the state of Michigan steps in, a judge is appointed, a court date is set, and there are probate attorneys that are assigned to your case. Those probate attorneys earn between $250 and $300 an hour, and the average probate in the state of Michigan goes about 18 months. The biggest problem is that there's no final message. There's no closure for family at a time when they've lost a loved one, and sometimes suddenly that there's no instructions. There's nothing left for them to do, nothing for them to act on. And probate is an open forum. It is public forum. Anybody can walk down to the court of Oakland County and see what your neighbors have and who's going to get what and what the creditors are. It's not what you had hoped for. What happens if you don't die? Here we're living in this age, we just, through this COVID, and people have gone into hospitals and not come back, where they become incapacitated. What happens if you're on the ventilator, and who's there to know what your medical wishes are? Do you want to be taken off? Do you want unnecessary or extraordinary measures taken to save your life? If you haven't appointed any medical directions or have any patient advocates, the hospital is left to determine what you want. You may or may not recall that many years ago there was a case, a young lady named Terry Ann Shivo. Terry Ann Shivo was a woman in Florida who was in a coma. She was in a coma, and her husband, she was essentially brain dead, and her husband wanted to unhook the ventilator and end her life. But yet her family did not. This became a huge legal battle. It went on for about 9 months. It went all the way to the Supreme Court of the state of Florida. It became national news. Silly that all that happened, because all they needed were a couple pieces of paper to take care of that, to decide what she wanted. Also, if you're lying in a coma, who is there to handle your finances? Have you appointed anyone do they have a power of attorney? You're sitting in the hospital comatose for 6 months. Who's there to pay the bills? Who's there to make the house payment, pay the insurance premiums? Who's going to take care of the utilities? If you don't pay your house payment for 6 months, could the bank foreclose on that? The answer is yes, absolutely. Okay, you need to have those kinds of powers to do that. Problem is that estate planning means thinking of dying, and there's a denial. People don't want to think about it. Hey, if I don't think about it, maybe it won't happen. Well, there was a movie about 10 years ago that was called Talladega Nights. In there, one of the persons was played by Will Ferrell. He says that 98% of us will die at some point in our lifetime. Well, I would argue that that is 100%, and nobody gets out of here alive. So with that said, this is something that's going to happen to all of us. Maybe it makes sense to plan, to keep others. What happens if you don't have an estate plan? Well, as I said, your heirs are subjected to the state will step in and interpret what you wanted for you. Your heirs, your beneficiaries, the people, the family that you leave behind will be subjected to a number of obstacles. Probate court is one. As I said, average probate in the state of Michigan last 18 months. Creditors. Probate is a public forum. It is open. Your creditors are notified. Lawsuits. Anybody has a lawsuit or anybody thought that they were wronged by you can go down to the probate court and place a lien. There are judgments, there are legal fees. All of those things can compromise the legacy. And meanwhile, the people that you leave behind are just left to scratch their heads and wonder why. I'll go back to that for a moment. I'm reminded of our own Aretha Franklin here in Detroit, the Queen of Soul. Aretha died in 2018, and she had cancer. She'd had some other issues too. But when she passed away, she left no will, no direction. And yet she had the ability to do that. Well, here we are, 2020. Her estate is still in probate court, is still open forum. 2 people have already resigned as administrators of that proceeding because of the bickering and the fighting between the families. Heck, they're still arguing over who gets to drive the Mercedes. And yet, meanwhile, all of the legal bills and all the court costs just keep piling up. And the family is still left to wonder why they didn't do that. No will, no trust, no directives, no plan for that. What about guardianship for minors? Small children, if you're gone, who's going to raise that small child? Or if you have a child with special needs, it's an adult child. Maybe they're on some kind of assistance. Who's going to be the guardian for them? If you don't nominate one, then one will be appointed by the court. And if they were to receive money in a lump sum, that could disqualify them for benefits that they would otherwise receive. So if you have special needs children, you absolutely need to take a look at these kind of estate planning. What about if we talked about probate? Probate, if you have rental properties or you have vacation properties. You have vacation property in Florida and one here in Michigan, you'll actually have 2 probates, one in each state. Just multiple things that can happen. There's no tax planning without, if you do no estate plan. Estate taxes that Gandolfino paid to the tune of 40%, those are legally avoidable taxes. By planning, you can avoid many of those estate taxes. And lastly, what about the survivors, the financial strains that are left on them? cash shortages for survivors? Do they have money set aside that can pay for the funeral expenses, pay for the luncheon, pay for any of the bills that are going to pop up? Do they have the ability to access things? Without those notes left behind, they may not. We talked about the bad. How about some of the benefits? Benefits are simply this: when you leave a note behind, when you have an estate plan, you've created instructions for those people that you leave behind. It spells out what you wanted. You get to decide. You're in control. Your possessions get to go to the people that you would hope for and that you'd planned for. Who gets the Hummel collection? Who gets the baseball card collection? Who gets the antique clock or things like that? You get to spell that out and decide that ahead of time. It helps to keep the family together as opposed to fracturing and splintering the family. And it also avoids that additional unplanned legal expenses that you get with probate court. It provides for those otherwise small children or guardians, special needs for people that need that kind of protection. So far, we've talked about all of the tangible assets, the accounts, the house, the vacation properties, the 401k assets. What about the other things? Intangible assets. You know, we live today with Ancestry.com. People are anxious to find out, where did I come from? What did I do? Where were my family from? What about your character assets? What about things about your life, the purpose, your life experiences, the talents that you have? If you go back and watch that video that I suggested to you with Randy at the YouTube, you'll get some insight to see what kind of person Randy was. You see, Randy felt that it was more important that people were more important than things. He did that last lecture because he wanted his kids and he wanted his family to know what he stood for, why he did the things, and he wanted to reach out to the people and say thank you for the impact that they made on his life. That's a great thing. That's why he wrote the book, The Last Lecture, is he wanted to share that and let people know how much they meant to him. What about your intellectual assets? Do you own a business? Do you have a buy-sell agreement? Any patents, things like that? Those are all things that need to be taken care of prior to you being gone. This whole process that we're talking about is a generational planning. We're not just talking about for the here and now, but also for the next generation. Again, as Randy pointed out, he wanted his kids to know what he stood for and the things that were important to him. This is an intentional process, two-phase. It not just looks at the existing tangible assets, but also the intangible assets. Helps you to plan that legacy beyond where we're at today. First thing is passing on tangible wealth. Now is the time, folks. You have taken the first and the very most important step to this process. And that is by just simply tuning in and listening to the stuff, talking about hearing the things that are important, that you need to be able to hear. Again, I spent my life educating people and teaching them about trying to help them to make good choices with their money. Here, you've accumulated assets at just half of the battle. Passing on those assets in the most cost-effective way with the least amount of taxes, the least amount of paperwork possible is better for everyone. And the second thing that we're talking about here is those intangible assets, your legacy, your values, your history, on to the next generation. I'm reminded here of this. My dad was a World War II veteran. And my dad always had, at Thanksgiving, always told this story. A story, it was about pumpkin pie. And my father, at the end of World War II, he ran a chateau in France. The chateau, the generals stayed there. That was where they were lodged and held, and it was his job was to make sure they were fed and taken care of. So he always told the story about how on Thanksgiving one time in 1944 when he made pumpkin pie, and it was the best pumpkin pie that the generals said they ever ate. Well, the secret was that there was no pumpkin in that pie. And that story, later on in my dad's life, he started to open up with more stories. And what I realized was that my father was a hero. All the stories that he had from the war that we never heard before. Unfortunately, my father passed away shortly after they started to open up. My kids, his grandchildren, will never know what he stood for and what he did. That, folks, is a huge loss. And that's some of the things that we're talking about here. How do you preserve that and move that forward? Well, a successful plan addresses several issues. One is for your spouse. Does your spouse have enough resources to live comfortably? In many cases, people have been married for 30, 40 years. They have a natural division of work. One spouse may take care of the investments, take care of the money, paying the bills as such. And the other one takes care of some of the other things. What happens if you take one of those spouses out of the equation? Is the surviving spouse able, educated, willing, comfortable stepping in and assuming those duties? Maybe. Do they have enough money to continue to live comfortably, live in the same house, do the same things that they were doing when they were together? What about the kids? Are they prepared for their inheritance? Do they know anything? Do they understand how to save taxes? Do they understand that they should save and invest as opposed to spend? Average inheritance here in this country lasts 18 months. It's true. As I see this, I'm reminded of a story from about 10 years ago. My client, we were discussing his estate plan and his future, and he said to me, "David, my daughter cannot inherit money. Can't get it. She can't handle money." And he told me some stories, which at the time I didn't necessarily believe, but later on I believed them because they were true. The story went something like this. He also, like Randy, contracted cancer. Died in a relatively short period, about 15 months. After attending his funeral on Thursday, I received a call at my office on Monday. The call went something like this. Hey, I just wanted to call to see when I'm going to get my check. I said, well, you don't understand. You're not going to get a check. You're going to get checks. And she said, no, you don't understand. I already put a down payment on the house and I need the money. Average inheritance lasts 18 months. So that story has a happy ending because how we had set that up in advance is that she was to get checks. And here it is 10, 12 years later, she has received income and she will continue to receive income for the rest of her life. And if anything happens to her, we can pass that on to his grandchildren, her children. You can do that with proper planning. Otherwise, that money in that case, I'm certain, would have been spent and gone. And I know that because the other money that she received was gone. So are the kids prepared? Very important to do this and plan. Sometimes it's the worst thing you could do is to give kids money in a lump sum. What about grandchildren? Uh, do they understand what you lived for, who you were? Story of my dad. Will his grandkids ever know what he did in World War II? It's important. It's also very cool things that you can do for grandchildren if that's important to you. And the world at large, organizations, charities that might be important to you, paying it forward to help your fellow man. I'm reminded every time I pull into the parking lot of the church that I attend that parking lot was paid for because there was an individual, a parishioner, who named that church in his estate plan. And when he passed away, there was money there to pave that parking lot. So it's a cool thing to do if that's important to you. We follow a 6-step process. The first step is this. Through this webinar, set up a time where to chat. I can help answer questions. You tell me your story, tell me your situation, and maybe we can help. We've done this before. First thing is planning for that incapacity. As I said, you need to have those documents. Well, what happens if you just have that stroke? If you just something happens and you don't die, but it's a living death. I'm reminded here of an individual a couple years ago. I talked to him and his wife, told them they need to do this estate planning stuff. He was 42 years old. He ran marathons. Heck, he didn't have to worry about this. Well, as it turned out that he was running a marathon, and on mile marker 3, he collapsed. 2 weeks later, he woke up in the hospital. Woke up in the hospital with the inability to speak. He had a stroke while running the marathon. He told me as he sat in my office with tears running down his cheeks, he told me that, Dave, the only thing I could think of when I was in that hospital bed was how I screwed up with my family, how I didn't do those things that you told me to do, and if I die, how it's going to be for my family. Folks, what we talk about here is real. I've been through this stuff. By going out and planning, it's preventable. Get organized. This is an area also that we can help. Now, I mentioned about following up, hitting that little pop-up on the screen, is that for the first 10 people that call in to schedule some kind of consultation, for the first 10 people, I have a family organizer that we will send out to you. This also is another step to help you to get organized to begin this process of estate planning. Why does it make sense to get organized? Well, if you're like most people, you have assets everywhere. Assets all over the place, 401ks, IRAs at different places. You need to, as you get older and you need to begin to consolidate some of those assets. If you have 3 or 4 different bank accounts at different banks because you wanted to be diversified, now is the time to begin to pull that stuff together. Pull it together to make this take the next step in planning. You need to figure out who's going to get what if I were to be gone. But what about your estate? Will your estate have estate taxes? And as I mentioned, those are voluntary. Gandolfino paid more to his estate taxes than he did to his family. You want to make it easy on your spouse, on those survivors. If you died tomorrow, would they know where all your important papers are kept? Do you have a safety deposit box? Do you have a safe? Do you know where the passwords? Do they know where the passwords are kept? How are they going to get into your accounts to find out statements, bank statements, things like that? Without those proper documents, they can't do it. What about the pets? Who's going to take care of the pets? Pets just going to get dumped at some shelter? What about explanations for your decisions? We're going to talk a little bit later about children. Love them all equal, but they are not all equal. And if you're going to treat children differently, it helps to explain that. Think about the people that you leave behind and the causes, the things that you care about. What about if your spouse dies first? What do we do with kids? Do we divide up things equally or according to need? Because they are different. What about those grandchildren? Did you want to do something for them, maybe? I can show you a way where your grandchildren can get a check from you each and every year of their life on their birthday to think about grandma and grandpa. What about friends, relatives, people that have helped out along the way? Do you have a child that you don't think is ready to receive that? I told you the story, okay? That is more common than you know, okay? And I've seen large estates get whittled away simply because people are not ready. What about that special needs child? Somebody that needs to be protected, someone that would not, that might lose benefits if they receive money in a lump sum. Are you prepared to talk to your kids about the inheritance? Now is the time to begin to have that discussion as we pull this together with not just the tangible, but also the intangible assets that we talked about. Those memories that can be recorded, that can be paid forward down the road. Part 4, yep, work with advisors. Put things in writing. Folks, this is what we do. We help people to make good choices with their money. We've done this before, and we can help. And in some cases, a will may not be the way. There's things that we can do to title assets through beneficiaries where we don't need to get a lawyer involved. It's rare, but it happens. You might not have to incur that cost. There's also ways out there to do relatively inexpensive estate plans as well. But all of your wishes, that needs to be coordinated. You need to pull it together so it makes sense. If hopefully you're only going to do this once, you want to do it the right way. Have that discussion. Some estates, as I said, are simple, others are more complicated. And the complicated ones, it's best to work with an attorney. The attorneys, they've seen that. They know different ways to negotiate, different avenues to get things done. Attorneys can make you aware of possibilities that you didn't even know existed before. Start creating that family legacy. I've alluded to my dad, talked about Ancestry.com and how it's important, those roots, where did we come from? And what we want our children and grandchildren to know. We can write those things down. I've included in our packet here a generational guide. Once again, this is just a step, folks, to get you started to begin to think about this process and move forward. Hopefully, this webinar is designed to do two things. One, it's designed to be informational, and hopefully I've helped you to get the juices flowing or get things started. It's also designed to be motivational, to get you to get started on this process because it makes sense, and yet half of the people never do this. Some great quotes here. I love this one. This one is Warren Buffett. It says that I believe in giving my kids enough so that they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. Family legacy. Yep, we talked about leaving stuff behind. A piece of yourself to make sure that your life counted for something. Again, I'm going to encourage each and every one of you to go back at the conclusion of this and plug into that YouTube last lecture, Oprah. and meet Randy. Randy was a poster child for doing it the right way. Start to write down some of those memories, putting together scrapbooks, family recipes. I'm reminded here of my growing up. There was on Christmas Day, we would always go to church, come home, and play with your toys for just a little bit, and then we'd have to pack up in the station wagon and go to my grandmother's house. I'd usually be joined by about 15 to 20 of my cousins and a house full of people, and we would always finish dinner with my grandmother's chocolate cake with white frosting. That was great. Always we had that. When she passed away, and I'd meet with my cousins, we'd talk about that cake that she would make. Do you think anybody took the time to write that recipe down? Nope. To this day, when we've tried to recreate that recipe several times, the chocolate cake with the white frosting, but it's just not the same. Folks, there are things here that are important to your children and to your grandchildren. Now is the time to take this step and move forward. Start to write some of these things down. As I said, the first 10 people that call in to schedule something with Jill, I have a family organizer that takes you through. I will send you that. It'll begin to jog your memory, to get you to start writing some of these things down so that you can have them for the next generation. Once you get this plan set up, what do? Well, you build this plan. That's the first thing. Then you need to monitor it. Things are going to change because babies are going to be born, people are going to get married, and yes, divorced. 6 out of 10 marriages today end in divorce, and people are going to die. How do you feel about giving your soon-to-be ex-son or daughter-in-law part of your assets? Well, if that's a concern for you, we can plan around that. We can help to avoid that. Because as I said, things change in your life, and so will your plan. People get married. You might change your mind about things. That's gonna happen. I promise you that once you do this down the road, at some point you might want to adjust or change your mind because people are going to pass away and people are going to get divorced. Having the wrong people inherit your money, that divorced daughter or son-in-law. I'm reminded here of Howard Hughes. You probably all remember him. Howard Hughes started Hughes Aircraft. At one point, he was the richest man on the face of the earth. When he passed away as one of the richest people in the world, and he passed away without an estate plan. No will, nothing, no trust. Consequently, there are many, many wills that came out of the woodwork. It took over 40 years to settle his estate. 40. If you know anything about Howard Hughes, there was 2 classes of people that he absolutely did not like. One was the government, and the second were attorneys. Well, 40 years it took to settle that estate. The 2 biggest beneficiaries of his estate were the 2 people that he despised the most. And that was the people that got the most was number 1, the federal government, and number 2, the attorneys. Folks, I can't make this stuff up. Take the time to do this. Well, working together, we can help. We can refer you to estate planning attorneys, tax advisors. We are the financial advisors, as I said. We're here to bring this whole plan together. We help people to make good choices with their money. But we can refer you to some of these other individuals. Once you get all of this stuff done, it feels great, folks. You've got a trusted person that steps in to help, to do the things that you want to do. You've left those instructions. You've left that note behind. Your records are organized. People know where to go to take care of where your passwords, what to do with the pets. They know who's going to get the baseball card collection. There's no arguing, which is great. When my parents did this, the number one thing, we have 7 kids in my family, and she said, I don't want you kids to fight. Well, wasn't a lot of money, but because they did this trust in this estate plan, she accomplished her goal. The kids, all of us got along, at least for a short period of time. But as this happens with family, they get splintered. This can help to keep the family together. And you're going to provide for your loved ones, the survivors that are left, those people that need you the most. And also you can be remembered for the contributions that you had in the world. What are next steps? Well, next steps, I'll put that pop-up up here on your screen. And you'll see that here in just a second. There it is. If you'd like to, you can go ahead and schedule something here right away. And as I said, that Jill will be reaching out to each and every one of you to kind of get your feedback and your thoughts, and tell us your situation. Maybe we can help. We've done this before, at least once or twice. I'll leave that pop-up there for just a moment. If you'd like to call in and you have questions, please feel free to do so. Let me take care of all my disclaimers and permissions. We did get permission from Randy and Gandolfino. And we are an affiliate of a broker-dealer. Cambridge Investment Research and the Financial Center is a registered investment advisory firm with the state of Michigan. And there's that up there as well. Folks, this has been good fun. Hopefully that you enjoyed this and you learned something. This is helpful to get you to get started on that process of planning your estate. Don't be the person that says, I'll get to that down the road, because sometimes it's too late. So with that said, I thank you for your attention. And as I said, I look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye now.